So just want to quickly start off and say thanks for your attention and the time that you're sharing with us. You've heard, hopefully through the day, a number of presentations from various points of view on cybersecurity. It's important to us all. We have a slightly different point of view. It's not the human element, it's what is going on your network. I was interested in the stat that was provided earlier, 74% is human. I think at the end of the day, it's all human. We create our own problems. So what is the problem that we see is in IoT, IoMT. We heard a little bit of OT earlier. People getting quite animated about being left out, I think, was the general feeling. And the challenge is we are creative. We're always thinking about better ways to do things. In doing those things better, there are some elements that we miss out because we don't get the full information that we need. We create beautiful things. And while I'm thinking of IoT, I'm thinking of hand dryers. I'm from Zimbabwe, and it just made me smile when we had manufacturers of hand dryers made by Europeans that only recognize light skin. It was super interesting. So the scope of what we're up to. And this is the challenge. We bring these into our corporate environments. We don't know what's there. I mean, I don't know how many of you are actually in the industry, but you speak to anybody who runs a network. Their first answer to the question of how many assets do you have in the network is some figure, and they know it. That's not the case. Unfortunately, it's not the case. We've got early anomaly detection. There's many of the vendors here that you've heard speak very eloquently about anomaly detection. We too have a piece to play there. And it's difficult to define, measure, and reduce. And just think about what I said earlier about our creativity. I was at a show at the beginning of the week where there was this wonderful new VR invention for doctors to go and scan people's heads. Sounds fantastic. Those of us who sit on the security side are starting to see red flags all over the place. And we'll run through and we'll see why. I think a common thread from speaking to many people today, the lack of staff to do what you need to do in a network. Third-party risk. We touched on a little bit with Proofpoint in the presentation. What do you do when you see actually third-party solutions running in your network? You know they run in your network, but they're doing malicious things. We had a great example beginning of last year of exactly that, a hack that came in from a trusted solution by a non-trusted user. So our device sprawl is just going mental. I mentioned the VR headsets for healthcare. We're seeing it in our homes. We've got smart light bulbs that we can turn on from continents away. So it's brought right into our every existence. Cameras, air conditioning units, lighting systems, aircon systems. I was speaking to a gentleman earlier about just a simple aircon system that was in their system that was causing all sorts of issues. The extent of the problem, we used to have lovely little diagrams on what a network looked like. That's quite neat. For those of you who run networks and know what they actually look like, know that that's very, very neat. There's no doctors externally that are remoting in. There's no jagged lines with devices within the network, especially when we think MT, OT, calling out. How do we measure that? How do we do an efficient job of making that secure? Ireland had its own healthcare incident. I think everybody knows a lot about it, and more of it was shared today, which is fantastic. These stats here are all stats from well-known organizations on what it actually costs organizations when they are intruded. How many attacks are actually happening? We're most of the time oblivious to what's going on if we've got good security in the way. If we've not, we're an open target. We have the ability to allow people to run free within our networks. We know that specifically within healthcare, despite all of our ideas of it's a very lucrative industry and they've got lots of margin to play with what they do. They don't. Statistically, they're on about a 5% margin. So any breach within healthcare is an expensive breach. I used an example earlier today, and I just want you to all stop and think about it. Doctors, a doctor in one particular network we were running a proof of concept on, drove his electric vehicle into the parking, plugged it in, connected his vehicle to the corporate network. These are things that we need to be aware of, that you wouldn't ordinarily think of. So, frameworks are put in place to make us do a better job, all of us. We're all responsible. Every breach is due to a human. Some humans are more prone to it, and there are solutions to sort them out so they don't just see a nice link and click it and download it and say, hey boss, I've done this. Critical infrastructure, critical national infrastructure is one of them. We've got NIS2, we've got DORA, we've got lots of compliances out there. They all have the basic same premise. First of all, you need to understand what's in your network. As I said earlier, most people think they know until they find out that they don't know. And that happens on the IT side, less so on the OT side. In the IoT side, it happens a lot. It happens a hell of a lot. So once you've got an identification of your assets, your cameras, your door systems, what do you do with it? It's great. We've got all of this information now. We know what's in our network. You have to understand the vulnerabilities that come along with it, the compliance that's tied to it, the best practices that are given out by the vendor. Can you go and remediate it? In healthcare, you can't just go to a machine and decide to update whatever it needs updating just because a third-party package said that you should. Imagine going to a Siemens and telling them your MRI scanner, its OS is rubbish. It's full of security holes. They're going to say, well, update it. That wonderful warranty that you've got on your $500,000, pound, euro, whatever currency it is, machine is going to be invalidated. And if you push that patch, I don't know, you might have frequencies that the human body won't be able to sustain. So once you've got all of that information, you can decide what you're going to do. Now, some organizations will look at cybersecurity as a whole, and they'll say, well, you know what, it's acceptable risk. We'll take it on our insurance premiums. Something else lots of people don't think about. The insurance premium that comes along with not being protected and not having the ability to show that you're compliant with DORA or NIS or any of these other compliances that go on. You don't have a track record of showing what you're doing, what your best practices are to close the gaps in your network. And that's the last piece. What are you doing to optimize your network? So with what Asimily look to do is we look at three elements. Three elements that we believe are particularly important. You've got to know what's in your network. You have to know it. You have to know on a daily basis. It's not good enough to have a quarterly scan. I know there's organizations out there that do that, and there's those that offer the service. It should be a backup service. It shouldn't be the key thing. Your network is dynamic. It's busy changing all the time. We have people with mobile phones walking in and out. We have laptops. We have the human element looking to click on all sorts of pieces with all sorts of wondrous new toys they've gathered at shows like this. So you have to know what's there. You have to know what you're compliant with. The inventory alone in healthcare, I mentioned MRI scanners. That's a very expensive bit of equipment. How do you know that it's been utilized correctly? You don't. So you need a solution in place to make sure that you're getting the value of that investment. It's pretty simple. Each scanner has a job. Each department in the hospital will go in and they'll log in as a user, and guess what? If they're doing thoraxes, they're going to be doing a lot of them, you hope. If there's the the CT scanners, are they doing enough jobs? Are they making your investment worthwhile? And that's just a small part of the asset management. The efficient management. So I've been in vulnerability management for a little while now with a number of vendors, both IT, OT, and now Asimily, which is IoT, IOMT. I should say that M is medical, in case anybody was wondering. When I first joined the company, I thought it might be military, which I was set straight on. But all of these technologies, you see the first bullet point there on accuracy. They'll give you a list of vulnerabilities from highly critical all the way to informational, which is great information. Wonderful to have. You have to do something about it. That's what all of these solutions are there for. What do you do about it is the key piece. So the way that we look at it is we want to gather all of those vulnerabilities and make them relevant and check that they are relevant to your network with, I'm not going to say AI, I have said AI, our proprietary engine in the background, because I don't want to get stuck in the marketing piece of AI and whatever comes next after it. And we'll bubble up what's important to the network, your IPs, your assets. Because what's the point in having information on a CVE that's highly critical that has no relevance on your network? That saves time, which is our major commodity. We've only got a certain amount of time, all of us, here, and then it saves money. Money's secondary in my book. Past that, what do you do when you have an incident? And I think that there's some interesting technologies here today, and I hope you've had time to have a look at them, that look at what happens after the fact. What happens when there is an organization that doesn't have a solution like Proofpoint in place that's going to be ahead of the curve. So should that happen, we have the ability to look at a network, snapshot it at a certain place, and roll everything back to that point, which is important because healthcare, OT, again, time is money. If you're not getting scans done, if you're not seeing patients, you're losing money. You've got 5%, as I was saying earlier, in healthcare as the rough margin. In operational technology, you have one machine go down, you're losing millions. It could be millions. It could be the break of your organization. And that's bringing me swiftly to the end of my presentation. I kept it nice and short. I hope that all gave you some value. If there's any questions, I believe we've got a question and answer session now.